this movie played, I was at Telluride, and this movie played incredibly well there, and it makes perfect sense to me that you did pick up the Audience Award in Toronto. Congratulations for that. But you must have seen it play a few times now. Tell me why you think the movie is resonating, affecting people so strongly. It's connecting to something beyond the story itself.
I can't really speak to how other people feel, but I will tell you about how we feel has evolved through the past 2 years. When the rescue first transpired, like Jimmy and I were like transfixed to our TVs, to our our radios, saying like as Asian parents, as like humans in a really tricky political time in 2018. And this was like just something that like took our minds off of it. And then no one could anticipate that it would actually be something that reminded us of our common humanity. So when we had the privilege, thanks to National Geographic, to actually try to tell the story, it had every, challenge in terms of nonfiction possible. Like there's no footage, everything's dark, no one's cooperating. It's across the world and it's a pandemic. But screening it now, today, I think that it's the poignancy of its like kind of core message only resonates more, in that it really is about what connects us as humans, fundamentally. It's about absolute morality. Like if you were in that position as a parent, like you were the only person in the world who could possibly save these kids, even though you have these kids at home and you may be lost, like, would you do it? Like, can you be your best self? And, that continues to bring tears to my eyes. It continues to bring tears to Jimmy's and probably Bob's eyes, if they happen. And I think that's what allows this film to live.
So, Bob, I have another question, which is you did the editing on all three of the movies that this great team has done. Chai, how did you pick him? Why was he the right guy for you, and why does he continue to be?
I think that Bob picked us. I'm just so grateful that he decided that he wanted to work with us. It was really a very lucky moment in nonfiction, which is what kind of defines nonfiction. Like you happen to be in the right place at the right time. And so we were very grateful that Bob Eisenhardt, like the great Bob Eisenhardt, our closest collaborator, decided to work with us. But maybe you want to. Why did you want to work with us?
I was in need of a job, actually. I had started another job and with very seasoned producers, and they suddenly, after 3 weeks worth of work, ran out of money. And so suddenly I was out of work. And about 2 days later, I got a call from Jai. So these things work out sometimes,
But just in terms of process, like we had talked to a lot of editors, and like it's just the point is like just to wait till the right thing happens. And on the same night, 2 different editors who were very close to us were like, we just saw Bob at a party, like a very good party, and he's a new job, and they're like, call him tomorrow. And so we did kind of like cluster Bob being like, please, like, hi, I'm Chai, like, please. And we were lucky enough to like work. It worked out.
And they showed us great footage from Meru. It was extraordinary stuff. So it wasn't a hard decision to make.
It's been fun to watch your journey, I have to say. But this movie really looks like it has the most extraordinary, complicated, huge undertaking, and from a distance. Explain how Thanet helped you to get this thing done. It was a mammoth undertaking.
So it's Thanet Natisri, aka secret agent for what country we're not quite sure of. So Thanet Natisri owns a very successful restaurant, a Thai food restaurant. I highly recommend it. It's called Thai D, which is like a play on words, like it means like delicious. In Marion, Illinois, which is like several hours away from Chicago. We met over Zoom as one does in the pandemic. And I don't know, like this is like symptomatic, like it's emblematic of the rescue itself, where people who didn't like know each other personally reached out and helped each other. So Thanet played an instrumental role in the actual rescue, where he helped with water diversion. And as you saw in this film, like basically it wasn't about the water pumping, it wasn't about any other, kind of approach to a solution except for like the water diversion, like trying to move the water away from the cave, bought them extra time. As that said, like Thanet and I met over Zoom, and Thanet agreed to come to Thailand with me. We met in person in the Singapore airport, and Thanet's been kind of our guardian angel ever since, making it real, keeping it real.
So this movie is, because it happened in the past, you needed to put together an enormous archive of material, and you were working up to a certain point before you went to Thailand with what you had and the interviews that you had conducted and the reenactments. Explain all the different, maybe Bob, this would be good for you.
Yeah, usually you start out in these films, these documentary films, with a pile of footage. Like in Free Solo, we had like over 750 hours.
Dig us
of
out
stuff.
of this hole. Like we created like a big mountain. Like dig us out of the hole, Bob.
Yeah, so you have a feeling that it's there and you dig into it. In this film, we had like nothing. We had the interviews, which were great, but no other footage, and except stuff that had been plucked from YouTube, which of course you couldn't trace down because you didn't know the real source of. So it was a bit of a nightmare there. And then for over a year and a half, we got waves of material in. First there was some footage of the oxygen meter being read, and then there was some footage that we got from Harry, which was the anesthetizing of the kids, which was amazing. But all this, and then then we finally got some interviews with the Thai Navy SEALs, and then they gave us 10 minutes of stuff, just the sample of stuff we may or may not get, because the negotiations had been going on with them for 2 years before we actually got something. So we had this footage, we cut it in, but we didn't know whether we could actually use it. And then finally, Thanet came along. It's kind of the story.
So explain, Thanet, now we need to hear you tell us, what did you help them do?
And pulled all this footage out of nowhere.
Well, I'm just, it's a coincidence. Shai reached out to me over the Zoom, and she sent me the cut to see. And she told me that once you see the cut, you will know exactly what we need. And it was just like Bob said earlier, it was YouTube stuff mostly. And I was just kind of stepping in. And we went to Thailand together, and since I was like deeply involved in the rescue, I was able to use my connection to the rescue worker to get all of them and come together and contribute of their footage to our films.
So you also had to sort of figure out from what you had what was missing and what you had to recreate. Explain what happened in Pinewood.
It's like, this is different from any film we've ever made before, in that we weren't present for the primary events. And then you add to that a pandemic. So what's tricky about this story is that it was very fractured. Everyone had different experiences of it, from the Thai Navy SEALs, the U.S. Special Forces, to the children, to their parents, to like the locals, to the British divers, and to Dr. Harris. So, it's really different understanding, or hearing accounts of this idea of I have to anesthetize children, than when you actually see in person how they had to bind these kids' arms behind their back and then push their head underwater. Jimmy is not here, but we were both parents to a 7 and 5-year-old, and maybe that was part of our initial fascination with the story, is how could you possibly do that? And the reenactments provided us a very important opportunity during a pandemic to actually understand what we missed And like that's the whole thing about nonfiction, right? Like it's like you're trying your best to allow audiences, whoever they may be, to experience what actually transpired. And it was very strange not knowing that until we were in a tank in Pinewood where the real divers were saying, no, this is actually what happened. And like, no, it's not like this, it's like this. And that, like, I'm very grateful. It's very similar to kind of Alex Honnold and Jimmy himself, like this like attention to detail, but like there's certain emotional experience you can't really understand until you see it. And no one was able to witness this rescue in person except for those divers. And the reenactments allowed us this opportunity to actually experience it emotionally.
I was very impressed with the way that you were able to bring all sorts of little elements in and moments of humor as well. I mean, there's a lot of, but just that right shot of the mom responding at a certain point, you know, the one who's waiting, and you follow certain characters along the way. You had to, on the one hand, simplify it, but at the same time, show the diversity of points of view that were involved and not get overwhelmed by that. That must have been really difficult.
I mean,
I was just going to
difficult.
say the balance of those things, those different points of view, was very difficult to get. I think that was the main problem for a long time.
it was like excruciating. He's
Yeah,
saying very
it was
difficult.
like-
It was excruciating.
I mean, because we had the British divers initially, we had and the Thai Navy SEALs footage much later. It was hard to go back and kind of weave that stuff in to get the proper balance.
But you also were able to show a fuller picture so that it wasn't the European guys saving the day.
Well,
And we didn't really know until we saw some of the footage that Thanet led us to, some of the Army footage, which really gave you a feeling of the scope. And, you know, this was after working on it for 18 months, and suddenly you say, oh, wow, this is how many people were really doing this.
And it was also like my going to the cave itself, where we're finally being in the cave. You're like, oh my gosh, this is impossible. Like, there's no way these people could do this. And so it was like the sheer scope, like this sheer, like, I don't know, like it was impossible to understand the sheer, like size of this.
And you had to figure out what you were going to do with graphics and with animation and with all the tunnels that you created to make it clear.
Well, we're very lucky in that respect, in that National Geographic, our amazing partners for both Free Solo and this, had commissioned a television show that they actually created like a 3D scan of the actual cave, which is like more expensive than anything a documentary could afford. And so we were able to like, you know, I don't know, commandeer that, saying we're all National Geographic production. And it really was a great map for us because we knew that was solid. And that was something that was quite rare. Like no one else had it.
And you also you borrowed sets or something in the, you told me this.
This is my favorite story. Okay, so like we're like, oh, let's do reenactments. There's no way to go to the actual cave. There's no footage. So like maybe we'll convince the British divers to actually show us what they did. And so we show up for these reenactments. And like, you know, Jimmy and I are like, we're nonfiction filmmakers. We're very literal and we're very ornery. And so like this British grip is like, hey, I found this other piece of a cave on the set, like, you know, on the lot, and like maybe we could use it, and it literally doubled how much cave we had, but we didn't know if it was going to disintegrate in the water, so we're like, we'll use it really fast, like, so hopefully it won't disintegrate on our watch. But that's how it was. It was just kind of like a wing and a prayer, but like just to kind of give you a sense of how important this found footage was like, we could reenact until like they pulled a child out of the water. You can see some like, you know, shins. When we were able to convince the Thai Navy SEALs to share with us their footage, suddenly you saw what happened next, which is 200 people lined up for the next hour, passing this child person to person. And that's only what our imaginations could assume, like, you know, could try to imagine. Like, 'cause even the British divers, they had no idea. They were stuck in the cave. You know, and so that was like this kind of amazing like documentary approach where like you don't leave any stone unturned and just keep on trying to convince people to cooperate with you and share their story.
And Pemberton, Daniel Pemberton contributes a good deal here as well. the composer.
And in a very short period of time.
I mean, that guy, Daniel, he's an incredible talent. He composed a score in 2 months and more music that was in free solo.
Right. I mean, it's twice the average film's worth of music, I think, and he did it in, 2 months or something.
With
It's
great
extraordinary.
grace.
And
So how do you and Jimmy balance this role? I mean, you've developed it over many years now. What are some of the ways that you complement each other, your skills? Since Jimmy isn't here.
So I have the platform. So Jimmy would totally agree when I say that we're synergistic. But let's just remember that we're not only managing these films with Bob's great help, but also our family. We have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and
They're
it's all just
adorable.
kind of a thing. But what's special, I think, is that we have really different opinions and we have really different tastes. And so when we converge, that's something quite universal. And that we have this shorthand where we trust each other, absolutely. We trust Bob more, but we trust each other absolutely. That it allows us to kind of be 1 + 1 = 3. Because I don't question whether Jimmy thinks something's great or whether it's going to work, and he doesn't question me and whether I think something is emotionally important. And I feel very lucky that we have that. I think it's more challenging as parents and as a married couple, but here we are.
It's working. It's working.
We're trying our best.
So there was some kind of clock ticking on this. There were rights issues at the beginning. You only had parts of the story. You didn't have all of it. And there were other people making movies. There's a Netflix series coming. Talk about that.
Well, I think the the crazy part of nonfiction is the constraints actually are the opportunities. Whereas in fiction, if you have a constraint, you can write your way out of it. Whereas with this, it's just pitch black, the water is muddy, no civilians allowed to film. There are rights issues. You can't speak to the children, and
That's what Netflix has.
Yes, Netflix owns the rights to the children and their families. And, in addition, it's halfway across the world. It's in Thai, and eventually it's a pandemic. But in nonfiction, it actually provides opportunities. You're forced to adhere to journalistic standards, yet try to think your way through it. And, I'm really proud. I think we're all really proud of the film we actually made, given those constraints. And I think it allowed us also to really push, let's really pursue the footage we knew that existed. Despite, against all odds. Yes, we couldn't negotiate with the Thai Navy SEALs for 2 years, but we knew that if we went and got in person, at least we would leave no stone unturned. And that allows you to feel the rescue. And, our team, we'd worked in 3 films with Bob and, our entire post team, and they knew, we were living hell. But it was the good fight. And it was a fight that was quite timely in that, let's give ourselves to try and represent different points of view. Let me be able to look at my Chinese mother in the eye, knowing that I left no stone unturned in terms of Asian representation. And, that's why you make nonfiction films, right? That because that I know that I gave my best. I know that Bob gave his best. All of us, Thanet did, And
so I know we have to wrap this up, but have you shown it to the soccer team, and has it been shown in Thailand yet?
in its entirety, it hasn't been shown in Thailand. However, Thanet and I, when I went to Thailand eventually, once I had my second vaccine to go try to secure the rights from the Thai Navy SEALs, etc., I wanted to meet all the people we had interviewed over Zoom. And that included, I didn't interview them, but it was if we had the opportunity to meet the soccer team as well as their coach. And I didn't want to threaten the right situation. I just wanted to hear what their stories were and actually look them in the eye. And they had heard, the soccer team had heard that we had Dr. Harris's footage of them being anesthetized, and they asked to see it almost immediately. And that as a mother, as a human, really posed challenges, because I was I'm going to re-traumatize these kids.
Yeah.
But of course I have to show it to them. And that Thanet was there, like that evening of showing it to the children, like we honored them. And I can't imagine going through this incredibly like global story, like ordeal, and not understanding the most intimate thing that transpired to me. And I think we did the right thing, and we tried to be as gentle and as respectful as possible, but it gave us great satisfaction to be able to show up and answer what they asked us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for making this movie.
Oh, Anne, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
yes, thank you.